Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I am very happy to be here with you. The show is all about inspiring humankind and doing so through great interviews with individuals who have done really special things with their lives. In a moment, I will introduce my guest today and a very dear friend of mine to you, someone who truly has taken huge steps in order to develop himself as a human being. The people of Zimbabwe, and many others. Before we get there, however, I do want to dedicate this show to a little boy, and his name was Avrum Gavriel, and he passed away last week from leukemia. His grandfather also is a dear friend of mine, Jeremy, and Jeremy's children, Shmuel and Ilana, lost their little boy. He was a very special little guy who had a wonderful mind. And as Jeremy explained him to me, was someone who was far beyond his years. I think very often when little people go through such things, they develop a consciousness and awareness that other children, healthy children, do not. And, when I was talking to Jeremy about the passing of his grandson, he was telling me about things that that Avrum Gavriel had said to him, had told him, and it really was like listening to an older person. He's passed on to another world, a better world, and we wish that family well. As we say in Hebrew, we wish them only simchas, which is celebration, and that little fellow's spirit should be an inspiration to all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, with me today is my friend, Dr. Paul Thistle. How are you, Paul?
Hello, Avrum. Long time. No here.
It's been a while, but here we are again, and we have this opportunity to find out about each other, really more specifically you, and see how the years have been treating you. Now, friends, listen to Paul's background. It's really quite stupendous. He received his medical degree and fellowship in obstetrics and gynecology from the University of Toronto. From 1995 until 2012, he had served at the Salvation Army Hospital in rural Zimbabwe as chief medical officer. He is honorary lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe and scientific and affiliate staff at Sunnybrook Health Sciences. In 2008, Paul received an honorary doctorate of law from the University of Windsor. Paul is married to Padrina, lovely person from Zimbabwe, and they have 3 boys. They are both ordained as ministers or salvationists. In December of 2012, they relocated to Karunda Mission Hospital as volunteers. They've been providing medical, social, and spiritual care to the area, to Zimbabweans for 18 years now. 7,500 people seek assistance each year at Karunda. Many more served by the community outreach program. Is this pretty accurate, what I just said, Paul?
I think you hit the nail on the head, or I think it's correct. I think we have 100,000 patients a year. So the 7.5 is a bit low. That might be the pizzas that we deliver, but it won't be the patients that we treat.
They have pizza in Zimbabwe, do they?
It's 30 days are free. That's our motto.
That's old, my friend. That's old.
That's an old one.
That does not exist anymore. You're showing your age.
And so I think that's correct.
Your time away from Canada. Now let's dive into your story because it's a very prolific one. you were born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Your parents currently, God bless them, they are still with us. They should be well. Live in an area which is called Scarborough. Now, you studied to be a doctor. You became a doctor here, and at some point in time, you decided that you were going to go on your own personal sojourn, on a trek, and that trek took you to Africa, more specifically to Zimbabwe. Why did you decide to leave this very, very wealthy city where you could be living in a huge mansion today, driving a Ferrari, as opposed to being in Zimbabwe and living a very humble existence?
That's a big question, Avrum. And well, I think I went into medicine to look at where in the world could I serve the the best or the most needy. And there's needs everywhere around us in Toronto today, as I speak, right? Homelessness and the fallout of the economic and global challenges that we face. But going back to 1985, when I started medical school, 1994, when I finished, at that time, the HIV/AIDS pandemic was at its peak in sub Saharan Africa. And unlike, North America, where drugs became available in the mid 90s, our corner of Zimbabwe did not have access to care of that magnitude until 2005. And we had this epidemic of young men and women dying on floor beds in an overcrowded, older building, my previous hospital, and compassion ruled. Cure sometimes, comfort always has been my working model ever since those early days. Do what you can with what you have, where you are. And I was in a mess, or not me personally, but the situation in Africa. And there's a lot of, justice issues coming emanating from that this discussion about why we were so late getting antiretrovirals, but that's history. And of course, I wanted to serve women because women's health is always a neglected part of the spectrum of healthcare delivery. Saving the mother. Africa historically has had a high maternal mortality rate. So I combined one plus one and made it out to look like three,
Mhm.
and got on the wrong flight. I joke sometimes. I thought I was going to Acapulco, but I was actually diving off my own cliffs in my own way in rural Africa, and that's continued for 29 years. Trying to do what you can in where people don't want to work, and Northern Ontario would be other examples, and other remote parts of Canada and North America. But at the time in the 90s and even till today, I would make a strong argument to recruit physicians and nurses and allied healthcare personnel to come and join me in Zimbabwe.
Why Zimbabwe though? Why did you end up there?
Well, like Sesame Street, when you choose a letter, you usually choose A, B, or C. So you probably more likely to be in Albania if you're a physician watching Sesame Street, or Armenia. So it
Or
happens that
Afghanistan? Or Afghanistan?
Afghanistan, Zimbabwe's a bit out of the beaten trail, not alphabetically only, but in terms of the political, social, economic environment at the time. It was difficult to get work visas, even for a underserved population, and still is in some ways. So I chose Zimbabwe because the Salvation Army had a hospital, still has a hospital there, and they posted me. I enlisted, um, and that's where I spent my first 18 years at Howard Hospital before moving to Karanda the last 14 years.
Were you
So,
were you
and it's been
scared at all?
adventure. It's been an adventure, learning to how to deal with various degrees of poverty, life changes, things are changing, but generally, I would make an argument that, yeah, we're a forgotten corner of the world. And medically speaking, there are still great needs in
When you
Zimbabwe.
stepped off the plane in Zimbabwe upon arriving, do you recall your thoughts? Do you recall your response to being in a place dramatically different, even more than one could explain, than Toronto, Ontario, Canada?
Well, you left the bright lights of the city of Toronto and the noise and traffic of the 401 to the moan of the cattle in rural Africa. So the sounds are different. I didn't really know what I was expecting, and like life is what happens to you when you're busy making plans.
Yes.
And so I had it all planned out that if I could just introduce Canadian standards, or Western, you say, standards of healthcare to a rural population in Africa, then all would be well with the world. But not quite so simple, um, because one day you can think you can save the world, the next day you struggle to get out of bed because of the temperatures and the fever and chills of tropical illnesses. So you do what you can, and the adventure continues even to this day.
But were you scared?
No, I think it was just the unknown fear. Yeah, fear of the unknown.
Mhm.
Um, and it was 35 degrees Celsius in the shade. It was during a famine year back in 1995.
Yeah.
So it was a drought. So we're already doing famine relief. It wasn't Band-Aid or Michael Jackson or other celebrities. It was just Scarberian Paul Thistle, and with no band to back him up in that sense, dancing to his own tune.
Of which you
In
do very well.
world,
You do that very well.
well, yes. Since that, we've come a long ways, and yeah, it's a story. It's a good story. I would do it over again with a bit more street sense, but I would do the same thing if I had to go back. Meet the people where they are. Do what you can. Reach out, and don't worry so much about the Ferrari. Um, Worry about the illness, the people. It's about relationships,
Do you
not
have a
about the roles, not the
do,
roles, but the relationships.
do you have a lust for materialism at all?
Yeah, lust is a cardinal sin, Avrum, and
Do you
you wouldn't
crave a
want to
nice
say that
watch?
on a public podcast, right?
Do you crave a nice watch, Paul Thistle?
I mean, the sun comes up in Africa and it goes down. What do you
Yeah.
need a watch for? The cows come home, and the cows get led out to pasture, and in between you work, and after hours you work. So time is important, keeping track. But they say that Africans have time and Americans have watches. I read that or heard that somewhere.
Oh, that's very good. I
So
like that.
I would say North Americans, to be more generalist. I don't want to get into any conflict with our friends south of the border.
Yeah, thank you. I want to give a little context here to how we know one another, how we know each other. In 1996 or thereabouts, I started up an organization called Via Havta, at the time, the Canadian Jewish Humanitarian Relief Committee. I've spoken about it before on the show. And in essence, our goal was to encourage all Jews and all people to play a role in Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world. We had a few different departments within Via Havta, one of which was helping the homeless and the impoverished in Toronto. And the other was an international department. It was run by Dr. Michael Silverman, who's a mutual friend of ours. We decided to send a group of doctors and medical personnel to Guyana, South America. And then we made a decision to create a partnership with the Howard Hospital, Salvationist Hospital in Glendale, Zimbabwe, of which the chief of staff was Dr. Paul Thistle. As we mentioned before, you moved on since then. But those days, I have to tell you, Paul, were very, very dear to me. We developed really a wonderful relationship whereby the Jewish community of Toronto was constantly sending over pharmaceuticals, was sending over doctors and nurses and individuals of all backgrounds, which you needed in this hospital, which was, I remember the budget of your hospital, it was something like $30,000, is extraordinarily low. But we created this wonderful relationship. What was really nice about it is there was sort of a Jewish brothership and a Salvationist brothership going on. And we accomplished a lot of great work. A lot of great work, didn't we?
Those are the good old days.
Yeah.
You don't remember all of the negative. You think of the positive. You don't remember all the suffering that our people, our brothers and sisters in rural Africa had to endure.
Yes.
And some of them didn't make it through. So we honor those who fought the good fight and died of HIV and AIDS and other sicknesses during those 90s. But that we rallied, the global community rallied, including our partnership between the church, Christians and Jewish brothers and sisters, mobilizing. I remember the synagogue meeting we had. I think it was Ali Rubenstein's synagogue with Michael Silverman, and Doug McClellan was the photographer who's captured our journey for the last 29 years. And that we have to do something. We need to respond. And I would like to think that ability to respond and come together as a community at Toronto and around the world is still there today. Although the world seems more fragmented than it was 30 years ago. It's more divided. You think that we'd learn from the lessons of the past and not keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again when it comes to our global political scene. But I'm not into global politics. I'm into the orphan, the widow in a neglected or underserved, traditionally underserved corner of Zimbabwe, treating one patient at a time, sponsoring one child, one orphan at a time, one chicken fowl run at a time. It's not a chain of chicken outlets. It's just one chicken run. And running with that to build a community at Karanda. So, and that's how it started back in the 90s with Veahafta.
Yeah, great days.
Supporting us with the HIV/AIDS response. And I'm still in very good friendship with our colleagues from that era, that decade, even today. We're a bit older, a bit grayer, hopefully a bit wiser. But we are still here today. The fight continues.
I have to tell you, Dr. Paul Thistle, you're a very modest fellow. And you should be, because your roots are Canadian. Good day, you and I always joke. Does your father still go to Tim Hortons in the morning for coffee?
I think he goes to Burger King for a coffee because it's just across the street, and he doesn't walk as much as he used to do. Doesn't get out.
Okay. He used to tell me about his trips to Tim Hortons at 5:00 in the morning. But I want to touch on some of the things that we actually did through you at the Howard. One of the things that we spent a lot of time on, it was an initiative that was put forward by Dr. Michael Silverman and yourself, was what's called mother-to-child HIV transmission. And there was a study that was done, which was very highly effective. Do you want to tell us what it was that we discovered through your work?
Yeah, essentially, before the advent of antiretrovirals or HIV medicines for everybody, including pregnant women, we had to do it in bits and pieces. So we couldn't afford the full treatment. At that time was $10,000 a month, patented medicines. We had to give it with bits and pieces and effectively did it at the time of labor and delivery, shorter courses of potent antiretrovirals to prevent the babies from being infected by HIV. So we did it through studies that were approved through Zimbabwean research councils and published and became part of the Zimbabwean healthcare standards at the time to deliver the best punch with the least resources to balance. And so we saved lives. And children are alive today HIV free because of the work 25 years ago. They're adults. They're living their lives, and that's the the drama and the tragedy of HIV was the fact that it affected children. It
Yeah.
affected bread earners, men and women in the economic productive years of their lives, and that was the big fallout of HIV and AIDS. So it was a war, and it was a war of medical war. And again, even today, sometimes our hospital looks like a war zone, like one of those, you know, shelters or bomb shelters of old movies where people are just in the corners. We're doing what we can, but it doesn't look like a modern hospital. We mentioned the $40,000 a year, which was our operating budget. It's improved since then, but it's still nowhere near what a community hospital in Ontario might receive from a government operating grant. Your gift shop probably in your local hospital has a bigger budget than
Yeah.
our entire medical surgical services
Or
to
the
a quarter million
glasses where
people.
you could buy glasses, Yeah. I listen. I think you're, as I said, you're an extraordinarily humble man, almost annoyingly so, to be honest. Uh, the fact of the matter is that the study that we did was able to prove that for pennies, remember this, Paul, for pennies, that we would give the mother AZT and a certain dose, and a high percentage of times the child would not be born HIV positive, correct?
That's correct. Our transmission rate was reduced from anywhere from 30% if a mother is untreated and is breastfeeding postpartum to 2%, 2 to
Yeah,
3%.
right.
Now, to have one child born at all with HIV is a tragedy because of the
Yeah,
availability of treatment. But at that time, it was a very significant reduction in the transmission rates from mother to child. And Via Hafta was a big part of that. Michael Silverman, my friend and colleague, dear Michael, and we were part of that group, and we enlisted a army of soldiers, volunteers, not Salvation Army only, but our brothers and sisters from across the the world, actually, to come alongside us and fight this battle,
yeah,
and we won. Now we can look back at it with bittersweet, and we lost a few battles and we won the
yes.
war.
You know what's amazing about you, Paul? Just phenomenal. You're like a simple guy from Scarborough, yet you represented your mission in such a powerful way, in an erudite way. I always remember you standing up in front of groups again, so incredibly humble, and expressing the needs of the hospital, expressing the needs of the children, the orphans of Zimbabwe, and you always did it so well. You really did. You evolved into quite the statesman, I must tell you.
Well, I often say it's better to have half a wit than to have no wit at all, right? So you call me a half wit.
Do they
And
still call you that?
translation
but
to
but
my
but be straight with me here. Are you proud of yourself? Are you proud of yourself?
I am pleased that my life has demonstrated to many others that you can do a lot with little.
Yes.
You can
Yes.
provide a huge amount of to alleviate suffering with limited resources, and you can do it over and over again with resilience.
Mhm.
Because looking at the last 29 years, a cat has 9 lives. Well, you need a few more in a Zimbabwean, in our context in rural Africa. So I think I'm pleased that I'm alive to share this testimony to the world, to our younger colleagues in our medical schools, that you don't have to wait for the big numbers to come out in major randomized research trials, but you can take what we have now and translate it to a corner of the world that doesn't have access to care. So I'm trying to level the playing field, and I've tried to do that for the last 29 years, is to bring some of the simpler low-cost measures like the antiretrovirals in pregnancy and bring them down to the grassroots. So I'm not a rocket scientist. There's no space center at Karanda.
There isn't.
It's although we can think about that, that's another project. We're there just to try and level the playing field, because the rural woman in Africa has even less access to care than, I would say, than anybody in the world. There are other parts, you could argue, in war zones that are in extreme amounts of sorrow and suffering. But year to year, on average, it is the woman that's neglected, and rural Africans, Zimbabweans, are more in need. That's my argument, and people could argue and say other parts are in great need, and I think there's need everywhere.
And you stand by it. And let's tell our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about the Karanda Hospital. Firstly, in Zimbabwe, there are approximately 1.4 million AIDS orphans. At Karanda, the hospital of which Dr. Paul Thistle is chief of staff, there are 152 beds, 5 doctors doing 3,500 surgeries a year, 20 midwives doing 1,800 deliveries, 30 nurses. The annual government support is 30 grand, and the hospital is run on a budget of 1% of a similar sized hospital in Ontario. Outpatients seen annually about 75,000. Nutritional support provided to 15,000 malnourished residents. Now, you made a statement a few minutes ago, very important phrase, that you can do a lot with a little. I distinctly remember one of the challenges that we had with our studies in Zimbabwe was how effectively could we get out to the women living, again, in rural Zimbabwe, kilometers away from the hospital, and deliver the appropriate pharmaceuticals to them so that they could be part of the study, so mostly so that they could have a healthy child. And people came up with these very creative ideas. I guess the simplest one was, let's get some bicycles. We'll ride out there on bikes. Were any of them motorized? I can't remember.
No, I think they're old-fashioned bicycles. It's our community. I think that the strength of Karanda, the strength of African, is their community and their relationships. So if Howard or Karanda Hospital designs a study or a program to deliver medicine to the community, there's a buy-in. It's not a guaranteed buy-in, but we have relationships with the chiefs, the elders, the headmen, the headmasters. We call them principals here of the schools, and we have a track record. So they're not looking at a briefcase NGO that comes in with a program and drops it like a bomb and insists that they follow suit. We're involved in every aspect of life. We say medical, social, spiritual, holistic medicine, I call it. And that's very divided in an urban setting. You go down the street to see the social welfare office. You go down the street to see the dermatologist. You get your nose job elsewhere. Well, we don't do nose jobs. We just do jobs. And the joke was my liposuction clinic sagged, right? Back in the 2000 during the famine.
Yes.
So going forward, it's community. That's how we can deliver programming in our setting at low cost. We don't have to have the motorized mechanical way of doing it. Now it's all cell phones and WhatsApp. But 20 years ago, it'd have to be word of mouth or physically biking to the locations and spreading the good news.
Yeah. And I remember a study that was done too about on materialism in the West versus places like Zimbabwe, and the numbers were astounding. The study basically said, or perhaps it was an essay, that if we were to count the material goods that we have here, let's say in my home here in Toronto, it's probably 1,000 or 2,000 things, whereby in rural Zimbabwe, many people live in extremely small edifices, and on average, they had 6 to 10 or so material things. I remember at that time, one of the issues we had was a lot of kids didn't have uniforms for school, therefore they couldn't go to school. Many of them did not have pencils, so they had to share pencils, or they didn't have shoes. The difference between what you came from to where you went to what we did as volunteers and saw, it's astounding. It's astounding to see. I'm assuming that you still deal with that on some level.
Yeah, I think I'm acclimatized
Yeah.
to the situation, and I react accordingly. I'm not satisfied with the status quo, but the status quo has been around for a
A
long,
while.
long time.
Yes.
Why does history take such a long, long time? When you're waiting for a miracle.
Good
That's a Bruce
question.
Cockburn lyric.
Yeah, it's
So,
a good one.
so you deal with the big picture, and there's the macroeconomic or political, social, economic picture, and then there's the individual. So by dealing with the individual, one patient at a time, as I say, and one family at a time, then you do good in the world, in their world. You can't save the world, but you can save the world of one person,
Mhm,
and you
mhm.
keep doing it 75,000 times a year in outpatients in the general clinics, but our reach is much broader into the villages. So you try not to get discouraged. You still see you still have a tear in your eye, um, and and you still have that kind of feeling. But a lot of our volunteers, I don't know how they deal with it. I'm so acclimatized with it. I know people break down and cry on the first day. Tears are not enough, but you have to start somewhere. You have to meet people where they are. So you don't expect an urban physician from North America, Toronto, to be able to assimilate quickly into this sort of rural, underserved, underprivileged society, this community. But they do. They do. You
They
can.
do. Yeah.
Baby steps.
Dr. Michael Silverman told me that upon his very first visit to the Howard Hospital in Zimbabwe, that he was felt so um, unable to do anything. He's an internist. He's a doctor of infectious disease. He was trained to find solutions for big problems that other people could not find solutions for. And he said he was there, and you didn't have the materials, you didn't have the pharmaceuticals, you just weren't able to do anything for these people who were suffering so badly and every day getting worse and worse. So you're right. It took a long time for people to acclimatize. And I'm certainly very happy that you have over all these years. We would be remiss in this interview if we did not talk about the conjoined twins. Now, let me just give a little bit of background here. We used to send doctors to you to help out. And one doctor, Rachel Switzer, I believe her name was Rachel Switzer, she delivered, yeah, she delivered conjoined twins and set about together with you and via Hafta bringing those twins to Toronto to Sick Kids Hospital through the Herbie Fund. And ultimately, they were separated. Remember those days, Paul?
Those are the good old days again, and we
Yeah,
look
they
back
were.
fondly. The Via HAFTA programs are running at full blast thanks to support from CEDA grants and many other supporters. And it just happened that we had this sort of Soviet style, Soviet era ultrasound machine with the blurred cameras, like the old sort of war footage. And we saw two babies, twins, and we told the mother to knit extra sweaters. That was the first reaction.
Yeah.
But then we looked more carefully and discovered they were joined. And then the story continues. It happened to be via Hafta. Dr. Spitzer, Rachel Spitzer, was there on a
Good, sir. Yes.
volunteer stint. And she had the connectivity with the Sick Children's Hospital. Over the years, I've sort of lost some of the connections. She had it. She had it in her back pocket and was able to make the connections and bring people together. Now, you can argue that you give out worm medicine to 100,000 children in the villages. That would be a very cost-effective way of preventing and treating disease. But there's sometimes you need to you step up to the plate, you step up to the wicket, as we say in Zimbabwe, and you go into a different scale where you have resources and interest and support to fly two twins conjoined, diagnosed and delivered at Howard at our mission hospital and send them across the world. It was like a vacation um, for the mother and the nurse to escort these twins. And that's a success story. So you have these sort of media interest and it sort of brings focus and hopefully can help deflect focus eventually from the sensation to the needs on the ground, to the continued work. So it's helpful. And it put perhaps our ministry, our work on the map, and from that we've had a continued to have a rollout of volunteers. Our biggest years of volunteerism in Zimbabwe is probably the 5 years after the twin success story.
And you know what, the volunteers were very sort of colorful and excited in their own right. They were very excited about going to Zimbabwe, excited about working with you, and they brought a little bit of the panache, of the character of what we have here in Toronto and Canada. And of course, what we're very well known for is hockey. So a couple of our guys, I think Dr. Gordy Arbus was one of them. Who's very well-known doc here, helps out the homeless. Dr. Gordy, they call him. I think he's one of the guys who brought a bunch of hockey sticks to Zimbabwe. And you guys started up Hockey Night in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, Gordy must have been Gordie Howe. Dr. Gordy Arbus Howe.
Elbowing you in the head. Yeah, I'll elbow you.
Dragging the puck, right?
Isn't that cool, though, Paul? Wasn't that cool? I love seeing the pictures that Doug took of these little Zimbabwean kids running up the court with their hockey sticks. I don't know, what did they use, a tennis ball or something?
It was a cross between golf, where you swing the stick and it doesn't matter who you hurt or how it goes,
right?
Versus hockey, road hockey, street hockey, as we grew up in kids in Scarborough to play before the traffic.
Cars. Yeah.
By that time, it's cars all the time. So it looks like there's no hockey on the streets.
In Zimbabwe, it's cow,
So we didn't have the rules back then. We just were kids trying to move a ball from one end of the dirt court to the other. And we didn't have boarding. We had bushing. And somebody pushed you into the nearby, tree.
Yeah.
So those are the good old days. And it built a relationship between our community here and the greater community out there. I think people want to give back, and people in their own way, in their own story, have their own stories to tell, and they want their children to give back. And so we are on the recipient of all that goodwill and generosity.
Yes.
And it's the individuals that were raising the flag and promoting the work here in Zimbabwe. We didn't have the celebrities, right? Showcasing our work. We had the physicians and surgeons and nurses and students and teachers and everybody could come on board to pitch in for the greater cause. And yeah, I mean that still exists today. We still have up to 100 volunteers a year. But now, since COVID, it's taken a bit of a dip with the wariness in the world in general and the post-COVID effects. And the world has changed, but I think it can change back for the good. It just needs the pendulum needs to swing
Well, Paul,
towards peace.
just I mean on that one. Just to reiterate, you're an amazing manager. You really are. I mean, I'm sure your board of directors has their complaints about you. Board of directors always do. But just to see how you would coordinate and organize the volunteers and how you would take care of them when they came over. Everybody had their place to sleep and all things were prepared for them once they were there. I just accolades to you, my friend. I am so deeply, deeply proud of you. And to be a friend and to have been a colleague, it's really quite something to watch how you've developed as a man, as a doctor, as a Canadian, as a Zimbabwean. Really, as they say, kol hakavod. Well done, well done. Now, question for you here, Dr. Paul Thistle. You are married to the lovely Padrina. The two of you have three boys, James, Alexander, and Andrew. James being the oldest, who's now in medical school. The apple doesn't fall far, as you were saying. How did you meet Padrina?
Well, it was like a soap opera, Zimbabwean style, a general hospital drama. In the operating room, she was head or the chief of the theater. We call them theater. Now they're operating rooms in North America. And I was a young surgeon enthralled by her beauty. And
Romantic.
so we eventually dated, Zimbabwean style.
Yeah,
There's,
romantic. Yeah. Well,
there was
what's
no
Zimbabwe?
drive-in cinema. There's no drive-in at all. So we eventually got together, and history follows. And our boys were delivered at our hospital. You have to put your money where your mouth is, or whatever the expression. You got to provide maternity care. It should be good enough for your family if you want it good enough for the community, for instance. And
Did you deliver your boys?
no, I didn't want to do that. I was, I wanted to be smoking a cigar in the waiting room, or the
I'm
equivalent of
sure.
that,
Yeah, I'm
since
sure.
I don't smoke. No, let's
And
get that on
having
the record.
having a schnapps, right? Paul, what
So
what in true what?
midwives deliver the babies in Zimbabwe. I delegate, and it's not one person; it's teamwork. Our hospital is 99% national, and even at the time, 20 years ago, it was 98% national. And so I give tribute to our brothers and sisters, our Zimbabwean healthcare professionals and cooks and cleaners and gardeners who keep the hospital running on very poor pay conditions. They don't strike; they continue to serve, and so we delegate, and midwives run the deliveries, the labor and delivery, the maternity in our hospital. So the midwife did the delivery. I was there as backup, but fortunately, I didn't need to provide any assistance.
Thank
Thank the
God.
Lord.
Well, thank the Lord. What attracted you to Padrina? What did you like about her? What do you like about her today?
Well, besides the beauty, obvious, it's the vision.
Yeah.
She has a vision. She has a sense of responsibility of giving back. There's a global brain drain from north to south, east to west, and we're losing healthcare professionals in Zimbabwe. 80%, 85% will leave the country within 5 years from the time
Mhm.
of graduating, whatever degree, whatever cadre might be represented there. But Padrina had a desire to serve and to give back to her people being Zimbabweans. And therefore, we had a common vision. And and our joy, our sadness, our ups and downs, all those marriage vows and of for sickness and in health. There's a lot of sickness where we are,
Yes.
and all of that is wrapped around our common vision, our shared goals, desire to serve the people, and she's a good singer too. So and I don't sing. Sunny had Cher, and I have Padrina. You'd have to have an aging clientele that would recognize that joke, right? A
I was
very
gonna ask you to sing a song, actually. Oh, Canada, perhaps. No,
oh, Canada, maybe.
maybe. So you've raised three boys. Thank God that they're well. As I said, one is in medical school. How were you as a dad, or how are you?
That's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
That's the hard part when you have an 80-hour work week and you're doing administrative after hours and clinical work during hours. You're constantly looking to delegate, but delegation means you simply do more work. There's more opportunities building on the building blocks of our programming and projects together, even 25 years ago with HIV and AIDS. So being a dad is tough. Um, the good news is that I'm home. I don't go to work anywhere. I don't fight traffic unless it's a horse or a donkey in my road from my house to the hospital, 50 meters, 100 meters away. Um, so I'm there. The bad news is that the education, my children were in an international school. So they grew up with their uncle and aunt, and we would see them on weekends. So it's kind of like a boarding school arrangement. The good news is, I think my children have appreciated the contrast between, rural Africa, rural Zimbabwe, Harare, which is an urban African setting, and then coming home to visit their relatives, their parents, their grandparents, that is, in Toronto. They appreciate the contrast. They appreciate what they have, and I think that's an experience I would like to encourage all of our sons and daughters, that to be able to see firsthand and experience firsthand the 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 the, the huge gaps between the the rich and poor and the haves and have-nots, and I think that gap has widened since the COVID pandemic. Many examples of that, and I think that's an experience that we try to encourage volunteers. That's why we have a continuing volunteer program. They can have a chance to experience um, Africa, rural Zimbabwe as it currently exists. Some things have changed. Cell phone technology is everywhere. You can WhatsApp your buddies back home, but there's still great needs, medical in healthcare in particular, and seeing that need opens your eyes to a different world.
How have your mom and dad been with you, moving to Zimbabwe, staying there all these decades, marrying Padrina, having the three boys, totally different culture? How have they been with them?
Well, I think my parents are understanding, they're accepting
Mhm.
of my decision 30 years ago to work in a 10,000 miles away. the they grew up in Toronto. Most of their lives were in Toronto, anyways, so they understand the multiculturalism, the differences. They understand that the world is bigger and broader than the shopping malls in the GTA. So they appreciate. They may not agree, but they appreciate the differences, and they have a heart for people, which has been instilled in my values and character. And so I think we're not fall apart. We're far apart in distance, but we're not far apart in our vision and desire to help.
Because your wife and your three kids are black, have you ever experienced racism?
Yeah, I think we have. It's a very general question with a statement. There's tribalism, there's racism, there's all the isms in the world, and people are trying to find and distinguish the differences. I think we're all cut from different cloths, and we're all very different. And our, traditional white Anglo-Saxon neighbors growing up in Scarborough were different
Yes.
from ourselves in terms of um, character and ideas and values. So they're all very different, and I think to racism, yeah, we just need to try and understand ourselves, understand each other, embrace each other, reach out to each other. The world's a better place if we can do that. But often our own anxieties and fears puts up barriers and between, and a lot of them unnecessary, and some of them based on color of skin. But it doesn't stop with the color of skin. It goes into all kinds of
Yeah.
spin-offs.
Well, it
So
does actually, and I want to segue that into my next question. There is a Jewish community in Zimbabwe. It's been dwindling over the years. I think there's when we were working in Zimbabwe, I think there were about 1,000 Jews in Harare. I don't know how many there are today. Do you have any interaction with the Jewish community of Zimbabwe?
the community is very small and it's shrinking, as you have suggested. Because we're rural and our work is rural, and we interact with government um, and businesses and suppliers of medicines and surgical supplies. I personally haven't been in Harare. Never go into Harare, to the town, that is. The trip into Beverly Hills is a luxury for me on my work day. So our interaction is sort of a spin-off of Via Hafta, but not active at this present time. Um, and a lot of the Jewish community has left. I think their sons and daughters. There are some seniors that I'm still aware of, and I've been in contact with here and there. But the community has been reduced in size.
Do you have any thoughts about the huge rise in anti-Semitism in the world? Why that happens? Why it is happening? Why are the Jews hated so much by so many?
Well, I'm sorry to have to talk about this subject, right? Because
Yeah.
what is my perspective from rural Africa as a Christian, as a missionary, who has spent their lives looking after the underserved and in the general sense, and um, that I think we've lost our foundation. We've lost our historical foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We're like compasses that are going crazy and spinning around, and social media and including blogs and advertising is sort of people grasp onto the latest cause without thinking through the history behind the cause. It's the voice, the dog that barks loudest gets the bite, or whatever. And historically, um, no, I think people don't understand the foundation. I mean, I'm a Christian. I come from a Judeo-Christian ethic. Um, I would not be here today doing my work in Zimbabwe if it wasn't for the Jewish people, if it wasn't for the Holy Bible, if it wasn't for Abraham and his descendants. That's what the Christian faith believes. And
Yes.
that's why I'm here giving back to the world, because of my faith.
Yes.
And so most of our current generation, I think, unless you're religious and have gone to a Sunday school or a school that teaches religious history, the foundation, does not have that anchor, that does not have that foundation. So I say this generally. Um, and therefore you're grasping onto the latest headlines. And I feel that the foundation is there. We need to look back historically about these issues, and I don't know. I mean, I just think that we're caught up in social media sensation, not thought out, reasoned processes. And the foundation, my foundation, is different from, I think, people growing up today.
Paul, can I ask you to explain your relationship with God?
Yes, thank you. I
Well,
mean, all of us are looking for, a greater purpose in life. We may not have time on the Don Valley Parkway to really address them properly,
yes.
but we talk about, you know, happiness, peace, good and evil, heaven and hell, life after death, um, salvation. These are some of the foundations, the fundamentals of faith. We all address them in a very different way, so we're not going to agree. We can agree to disagree, but we can agree peacefully.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm in Zimbabwe is because my Christian faith says Jesus Christ, who is our Savior, and it's through his his offering of himself as the Son of God. That's what Christians believe,
Yes.
is that we have faith. He took away our burdens, we call it sin in the Christian theology. He took that away as an offering once and for all, and he's given us salvation. So we don't have to nickel and dime and offer up any more sacrifices to try and earn our salvation.
Mhm.
We don't have to, get air miles or bonus points by what we do. So my response as a Christian saved in the Christian faith is to give back. So I'm not doing what I'm doing to try and earn extra points to get on the fifth floor of the next afterlife. I'm there to just give back to God's people, his children, a small portion of what he's already given to me. And that's salvation. And it does not have a price tag. So I do this one person at a time, one patient at a time, one orphan at a time, and it just keeps rolling. And it's not about, do you feel happy or sad? There's lots of sadness, but it's peace of mind to know that you're giving back to God's people a small portion of what he's already given to you.
You're very, you're
Amen, brother.
very, you're very lovable. You're very
Well,
a Jew to my Christian brother. You're very lovable. Let me ask you a few questions here, okay, to wrap things up. Has a lion ever wandered into your compound at the hospital?
not that I know of. I think our community is basically free from the larger beasts of the African safari, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Um, I think we've got dogs and cats. We have the cat scanner, as I used to say, right,
Yes.
on the compound that would scan you. Low technology. It's a Siamese scanner,
I
and
mean, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
and so we have snakes and scorpions, and we have our plagues and pestilences. But there's no elephant in my cupboard or lion on our compound.
I remember that I think we used to have some communication problems with you in Zimbabwe, and you would say to me, Avram, I'm sorry, but the ox, in the nearby hovel, he walked into the electrical pole and it fell down, something like that.
Well, that was the old days when we had to climb a tree to get a cell phone reception. Now it's
Is
a bit
that true?
better.
True?
Those are the old copper wire telephones,
Yeah.
right? And you could dial a prayer. That'd be while you're trying to dial home. And the telex machines were in vogue when I first arrived
Fax
in the
machines.
90s. So we've come a long ways in communicating. and the whole world is communicating with each other right now.
Yes.
But
Yes.
are we communicating well? Are we communicating
Question.
to try and understand each other, or are we communicating to protest each other?
Good question.
Now, there's quite a difference between relationships, between placards and peace, right? There's a bit of a gap between the two. And something we're just fueled by, the urgency of the moment, or, I don't know what to say. I'm just doing what I do. And I was country when country wasn't cool, and still am today. I'm just doing what I can do and do it best.
What's your favorite Zimbabwean dish, perhaps that Padrina makes?
Well, it's usually sadza, which is the corn meal, which is ground up to be like a potato, mashed potato, and it's usually like a chicken, like a roadrunner chicken.
Mhm.
For those who are vegetarian, it would be like spinach with a bit of gravy on top to make it go down um, slowly and smoothly. So it's that's our staple. Now, with our works, with our lifestyle, we usually eat one meal a day. We grab a banana in the morning and a piece of bread at lunch, and that's our evening meal. So, and Padrina is an excellent cook. She's learned to adopt Western cuisine to Zimbabwean rural standards. She can make pizza,
Mhm.
she can make ice cream, whatever you want. If you're a prospective volunteer that has a very strict diet for ice cream, for instance, then Padrina will help you out in that capacity.
Have you ever met vegetarians or vegans in your environment?
They're usually very thin, the ones
Yes.
that have come over, because traditionally our rural economy is beef and starch, right? Like it's the sadsa and the chicken and the beef.
Yes.
Now we're learning to adopt vegetables in their diet, but there are parts of Zimbabwe that don't grow. Like the land, the conditions are not very favorable to market crops, like gardens. Now things are changing, but yes, we've had them. We've worked alongside our brothers and sisters who are vegan and do not have the same beef and booze, beef and satsa
Have you
diet.
have you traveled throughout Zimbabwe?
I think I've been everywhere once, but like I said earlier, I don't leave the compound. I come home to Toronto to spend quality time with my aging parents. Who that's precious. That's family.
Mhm.
So I usually don't travel as a tourist. Um, but I think over the course of 30 years, I probably hit every tourist trap in Zimbabwe. Um, the few that are there, and there's many lovely, lovely spots to see for those who are signing up on your podcast to volunteer at Karanda.
Do you get excited when you see a Canadian flag?
Canadians have a lot to be proud of, and I think I'm proud that I grew up in a society in Canada that had the freedom, they had the quality of education from the preschool, the kindergarten, to the medical school where I graduated, and the ability to grow up in a Toronto as a multicultural city. That's a huge advantage. That's a stepping stone to a cross cultural exchange, which
Yeah,
is currently Zimbabwe, and we have a lot to be thankful for. We have a lot to be proud of. Again, perhaps we've lost our moorings a little bit. So, as I say, all societies sort of swing a bit back and forth, and perhaps we need to figure out how we're going and think about it and discuss it. I think we need forum to be able to express our opinions in a positive, pleasant, productive manner, and not be concerned about being, shouted down
absolutely.
or overruled, or there's other terminology that I'm not familiar with.
Woke.
That's
It's called woke.
um,
Are you watching the Edmonton Oiler game tonight against Florida?
Well, I can't watch a Toronto Maple Leaf rerun
No.
anymore. I mean, it's tears are not enough, as I say. Is it? But the Edmonton Oilers, I think the whole country is sort of slowly coming alongside, even
Yes.
though there's a rivalry between our big cities,
Yes, there is.
and coming on board that there's a Canadian team, a hockey team, vying for the cup for the first time, I think, in 30 years.
Many, many years. Yes.
You know, and our Zimbabwean hockey franchise is much further behind in development. But we will be there one day.
Even
Remember
further
Cool
behind the Leafs.
Runnings? Cool Runnings. We're going to have our own
Oh, nice.
our Olympic ice hockey Winter Olympic presence.
I cannot wait. They have that in Israel, by the way. Israel has done a lot on the international scale, the international theater in terms of the development of hockey. Paul Thistle, Dr. Paul Thistle, I want to thank you very much for this wonderful interview. I said at the top of the show that the reason I want to do this show is because I want people to think about who we are. And I want people to think about the brilliance that we're responsible for. And when I say we, I mean humankind. If you take a look at creation, if you take a look at the development of ideas, technology, medicine, right? Zimbabwe is not where it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's not where it's going to be in 30, 40 years from now. It is in the development phase, but it's doing a little bit better. And I think that the world is progressing forward, albeit with a bunch of pockmarks. But we have to be conscious of the beautiful things that we humankind are responsible, Christian, Jew, Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, doesn't matter. And when we do that and we look at ourselves and we say, hey, way to go, man. There's like a guy that I know. His name's Paul. And for some reason, he left Scarborough, Ontario, and he went off to Zimbabwe, and he's been there for 30 years, and he's done incredible things for rural Zimbabweans. I know that guy. And that's part of humankind. You've made us very proud, Paul. You really have. And I want to thank you deeply for that. I really do.
Well, I'm just a small part of a bigger picture. You do, like I say, in my corner, in your corner. Let's meet and have a coffee sometime in Toronto or a cup of tea, Avrum, and carry this conversation forward.
Yes, let's.
You're welcome to contact me, those who are interested in carrying this conversation or carrying their bags, their hockey bags full of medical supplies to Africa. We can be in touch. I will figure it out. We'll find a way.
If you want to be in touch with Paul, just throw out an email or something that people can be in touch with you through, or they can use my email. Go ahead, tell us something.
Well, yes, it's drpthistle@gmail.com. All one word, no capitals. We're all small with small letters. drpthistle@gmail.com. You can Google me, www.karanda.org, and figure out where we are, and the rest will follow suit. Looking forward to hearing from people.
Go Edmonton Oilers. Go Edmonton Oilers. And go Zimbabwean hockey players. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. Thank you so much for joining me, for joining my guest today, Dr. Paul Thistle, a dear friend, an incredible human being. Listen to the interview very closely. Take out of this interview what really moves you, what's compelling to you, and move into your own zone, something that strengthens yourself, that strengthens your community, strengthens the world in which we live in. We are a marvelous, marvelous creation, humankind is, and we have such great potential. And I think you heard about a lot of that potential here today. So you've been listening to the Avrum Rosensweig Show, and we look forward to being with you once again very shortly. Have a great day.